Greetings all and welcome to part 10 of the Elliott Wave 101 course. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, then please do so, and that way you don't miss any future updates as more material is published. If you found this video helpful, then please give it a like and don't forget to check out the other course videos. So in the next few videos, we're going to talk about some of the guidelines as laid down in the Elliott Wave principle. In this video, we're going to examine the guidelines of impulses. So from the Elliott wave principle, a rule is so called because it governs all waves to which it applies. Typical yet not inevitable characteristics of waves are called guidelines. Guidelines of impulse formation, including extension, truncation, alternation, equality, channeling, personality, and ratio relationships, are discussed below and throughout chapters 2 and 4. So we're going to do everything here. We will leave personality aside. That will be covered in future videos. So remember, a rule should never be disregarded. Analysts who routinely break any of the rules detailed in this section are practicing some form of analysis other than that guided by the wave principle. These rules have great practical utility in correct counting. So note that guidelines are just that. They're there to guide us to the true count. So while we cannot break the rules, with guidelines we just have to apply as many of them as possible to come up with the best fitting count. So here are the guidelines for identifying impulses from the Elliott wave principle. So obviously there are many, so I'll spare you my dulcet tones in reading them all aloud and instead just jump straight to the visual examples for each one. So firstly, we start off with some alternation. So wave 4 will almost always be a different corrective pattern than wave 2. Wave 2 is usually a zigzag or zigzag combination, and wave 4 is usually a flat triangle or flat combination. So the guideline tells us that when we look at an impulse, what we should expect more commonly is that we get a zigzag in the wave 2 and a flat in the wave 4. Okay, that doesn't mean that we can't have a flat in wave 2 and a zigzag in wave 4. It just means that it's less likely, and that the guideline would suggest to us that we alternate forms. So while we could have a zigzag and another zigzag, it's less likely. If we get a zigzag in wave 2, we are expecting a flat or a triangle in wave 4. And the reverse is true. If we get a flat in wave 2, we're looking for a sharp zigzag, potentially in wave 4. Sometimes wave 5 does not move beyond the end of wave 3, in which case it's called a truncation. A truncation can usually be verified by noting that the presumed fifth wave contains the necessary 5 subwaves. A truncation often occurs following a particularly strong third wave. Now, look, you won't come across truncations all that often, and there's something that I am very hesitant to ever go to, only if I'm absolutely forced in the count to make a wave 5 truncated. So they're not very common, but they will occur. It'd just be an option of last resort when doing your counting, I would suggest. Wave 5 often ends when meeting or slightly exceeding a line drawn from the end of wave 3 that is parallel to the line connecting the ends of waves 2 and 4 on either arithmetic or semi-log scale. So this is what we call the guideline of channeling. If we can get something that channels very well, then that just helps us to identify the impulse. It doesn't have to happen. Note that wave 5 could finish through or under the channel, but if it touches the channel, it's just another layer of confluence that helps us to identify the impulse. Another channeling technique is the base channel, and you can see here we get this by taking the start of the impulse, drawing a trend line from it that connects the bottom of 2, and then taking a parallel channel that connects the top of 1. Now we use this to see if price is going to break. If price breaks through the base channel, that's a good sign that we've got a third wave underway. The other thing that can sometimes happen is wave 4 can come down and test the base channel from above, which just helps to give another layer of confluence that we've got an impulse underway. The center of wave 3 almost always has the steepest slope of any equal period within the parent impulse, except that sometimes on an early portion of wave 1, the kickoff will be steeper. So you can see here that wave 3 is the steepest wave, and within that wave, the third wave subdivision is the steepest again. So that would be where I would say the center of wave 3 is, and that is usually where the strongest price action can be found, so it makes sense that price would be advancing the most rapidly in that position. So sometimes we'll see what we call a kickoff wave in the wave 1 position. Now, a kickoff wave could be started by basically the market, everyone in the market reacting to something new all at the same time. So it might be some sort of surprise that the market hasn't anticipated that changes the trend, but it'd be something that comes across as being very, very clearly changing of the trend. There'd be a lack of ambiguity, which is usually associated with wave 1s, which we'll see in wave personality. But usually you'll get a kickoff wave when the trend change is just apparent to everybody, and that will be the steepest part of the impulse. So now we'll talk about extensions. Waves 1, 3, or 5 is usually extended. An extension appears stretched because its corrective waves are small compared to its impulse waves. It is substantially longer and contains larger subdivisions than the non-extended waves. Often the extended subwave is the same number, 1, 3, or 5, as the parent wave. So what we see here is that when we look at an impulse, out of the 3 actionary waves, one will always be extended, meaning that it will always be much, much longer than the other 2. And often what we'll find when we've got an extended wave, you can see here that wave 3 is the longest wave by a long way. And within that wave 3, we can see that its subwave 3 is also an extension. So we use this guideline to try to identify impulses because we can't have more than one extended subwave except in certain circumstances. So even though wave 3 is usually the extended wave, it doesn't mean that you can't have extensions in the first wave, although they're very uncommon. But sometimes we do find extensions in the 5th wave. And that leads us to our next guideline. Rarely do 2 subwaves extend, although it's typical for waves 3 and 5 both to extend when they are of cycle or supercycle degree and within a 5th wave of 1 degree higher. So here you can see on the left we do have an extended 3rd and 5th wave, but it's just not very likely that you're going to see that formation all that often. Usually only one of the subwaves will be extended. And here on the right we can see an extended 5th wave, a 5th wave at cycle degree with extensions in both the 3rd and the 5th wave. Now you're not likely to run into cycle degree or supercycle degree very often, as we're dealing with years, decades, a very, very long time frame. However, it's worth being aware of what the book is telling us there. So the next guideline, wave 1 is the least commonly extended wave, as we've already discussed. Now when wave 3 is extended, which is very often, waves 1 and 5 tend to have gains related by equality or the Fibonacci ratio. So that means when we've got an extended wave 3, which is common, the most common relationship we look for is the length of 1 and the length of 5 to be equal, as shown on the left. Or sometimes the length of 5 I should say, might be 61.8% the length of 1. Or sometimes in other extreme cases, the length of 5 might be 161.8% the length of 1. So really we're just looking for Fibonacci relationships. It doesn't have to be the 61.8, though that's very common. When wave 5 is extended, it is often in Fibonacci proportion to the net wave travels of waves 1 through 3. So when we've got an extended wave 5, one of the techniques we can use to project where we think that might go, or if we do indeed have an extension, is to take the lengths of waves 1 to 3, project off the bottom of 4, and take 61.8% that length to look for the top of 5, as shown on the left. Another way could be to take the lengths of waves 1 to 3, and take maybe 161.8% that length, as shown on the right. Though I would say the situation on the right would be very, very rare, whereas the situation on the left could be far more common. Wave 4 typically ends when it is within the price range of subwave 4 of 3. So that is just pretty straightforward. We look for wave 4 to make a bottom within the price range of wave 4 of 1 lesser degree. This one's very handy and one that I use all the time. Wave 4 often subdivides the entire impulse into Fibonacci proportion in time and or price. Now I'll leave the time aside, But one thing I check when I look at an impulse is I'll put a retracement over the entire impulse and look for any point that might go down to the 38.2% as a pointer to where wave 4 may be, as shown on the left. On the right, we've got an extended wave 5. Now, if we can get a 61.8% touch down there for wave 4, then wave 5, that is how we would identify an extended wave 5, or that's one of the ways that you can do it. So a few more guidelines here. One of the most common retracement targets for a wave 2 is between 50% and 61.8% the length of wave 1, as shown here. But remember, that's a guideline, so wave 2 could go much deeper, it could be shallower. But between the 50 and the 61.8 is usually where we expect it. A common retracement area for wave 4 is between the 23.6 and the 38.2% the length of wave 3. So once again, it doesn't have to go there, or it could go deeper. It just can't overlap 1, as we know. But this is usually the common sort of area that we would look for. And finally, the most common area for wave 3 projection is between the 161.8% and 175% the length of wave 1, as shown there on the left. The area between that 127.2% and the 138.2% the length of wave 1 is the next most common area, as shown on the right. So once again, wave 3s don't have to adhere to these levels. These are just guidelines. Okay, so that's what we expect. But it's not set in stone. It doesn't disqualify them from being impulses if they don't reach those areas. Stay tuned for the next video where we'll look at further guidelines around various structures. Thanks for watching.